Hi everyone, it's Miss Brown again, and I'm back for day 4 of our lesson this week, which is making inferences and drawing conclusions in fiction. So without further ado, I'll start the presentation. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, we are making inferences and drawing conclusions, but today we will do so in writing. So first, we'll make inferences and draw conclusions, but then we'll create a short story using inferences that we've made about a story starter sentence that I'm going to give you later in the lesson. You'll need a notebook and a pencil for this lesson. Now, quick recap. How do we make an inference again? An inference is something that you think is true based on information that you have in the text. A conclusion is something that you decide after thinking about all of the information that you have and making your inference. Now, remember, earlier in the week, we made a graphic organizer called the book plus brain equals belief organizer. Okay. So we're going to think about that as we create our own fiction today and make inferences about the story starter sentence while we create that fiction. All right, so we're going to practice. So first, I'll give you this picture. The caption says, "What happens in this house?" So you're going to answer that question and make inferences about what you think is going on in that house. This will lead to the story that you'll write later on during our lesson. So the story should be about, the paragraph should be about 5 or more sentences. And I want to see, I want you to make sure you show how you feel about what's happening in the house. Put some emotion into this lesson. So if I were you, I'd pause the video here. I'd take about 5 minutes to jot down my answer in my notebook and then resume the video when you're done. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, by now you should have had about 5 minutes or so to write. So I'm going to share my sample paragraph with you. Um, It says, "I feel that the house in the picture is abandoned. The house looks very old and has not been taken care of. Also, there are tall trees, around the house and weeds that have not been cut in the front yard. The windows are broken and the roof looks very old and weathered. This is not a house that I would want to visit." Notice I pointed out different things about the house in my sample paragraph. I talked about how it looks very old and how it hasn't been taken care of. I talked about the tall trees and the weeds around the house. I discussed the broken windows in the roof, which leads to my inference, which is in the first sentence, that I feel that the house is abandoned. So, do you see how to take something from text or from a picture, make an inference about it, and then from there, write about it? Okay, we're going to move on. So today's independence practice activity is to write a short story. Again, I've given you a starter sentence below. From there, you're going to make some inferences. So I would suggest that you jot down some inferences in your notebook and write what you think happens next from there. So your story should be at least a paragraph in length, and it has to have clues that lead the reader to make inferences about each event that happens in the story. So here's our starter sentence. "I knew that the day would be awful before I even got out of bed. First, I forgot to set my alarm clock. The rest of it is on you." Okay, by now you should have written your stories. In the last slide, I would suggest you should have paused the video like we always do, and you'll have your stories written out. So we're now at the conclusion of our lesson, which is to do our written reflection. Since we wrote a short story today, our written reflection will be very short. We're just going to answer these exit interview questions. So the first exit interview question is to state the main idea of the lesson today. Question 2 is to ask what questions you need answered in order to understand the material more clearly. Number 3, which details from the lesson help to clarify the learning objective? And number 4, what personal connections did you make during the activity? So on a separate sheet in your notebook, jot these questions and the answer to those questions down, and then you'll be done with today's lesson. Tomorrow, we will recap our notes from the week, and recap the lessons that we've done all week. And we will also complete a practice activity just to kind of see if you've gotten the hang of finding inferences and making conclusions in fiction. At the end of the lesson, I have included a link to Quizlet that you guys can go to practice making inferences in fiction. Again, I thank you all for joining me, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.